This time on Crime Inc., Bonnie and Clyde's short but bloody lives. The killing fields of Cambodia. A homespun hero goes to jail. Suicide bombers target the USS Cole. And the case of the squabbling cat burglars. But first, Reagan under fire. On the 30th of March 1981, just before 2:30 p.m., shots rang out as American President Ronald Reagan was leaving the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. Two staffers and a police officer went down in the hail of bullets. The shots also hit the presidential limousine, which was quickly driven away. At first, no one realized the president himself had been hit, as the bullet had entered under his armpit. Reagan himself thought his pain was due to a fractured rib. But when his security men checked him for injuries, he coughed up blood, indicating a punctured lung. The car was swiftly diverted to George Washington University Hospital, and the president insisted on walking unaided to the emergency room, where he collapsed and was whisked into surgery. Fortunately, Reagan recovered well and was soon out of hospital. He returned to the Oval Office less than a month after the shooting, to the applause of his staffers. As the shots rang out at the Washington Hilton, it didn't take authorities long to identify the culprit. He was John Hinckley Jr., the son of a wealthy, well-connected Texan oil family. Hinckley had become obsessed with the 1976 movie Taxi Driver, in which a character played by Robert De Niro plots to assassinate a presidential candidate. He fixated on actress Jodie Foster, who portrayed a teen prostitute in the film. In 1980, Foster was studying at Yale University, and Hinckley enrolled at the college in an attempt to get near her. He left love letters and poems in her mailbox, and on March 29, he saw the president's schedule in the newspaper and decided to do something so spectacular it would grab Foster's attention.
Due to my profession as an actress, I've often been contacted by strangers. I discourage all strangers from calling or visiting me. I receive a great deal of unsolicited mail, but I seldom read it. I've never met, spoken to, or in any way associated with one John W. Hinckley. Last fall, I received several pieces of unsolicited correspondence signed John W. Hinckley or JWH, and I threw them all away. This is not uncommon, as I receive a great deal of similar unsolicited correspondence. At the beginning of March, I received three or four or more notes similarly signed, and on March 6, 1981, I gave them to my college dean, who in turn gave them to the Yale police. These are now in the custody of the FBI. In none of these letters and notes I received was any mention, reference, or implication ever made as to violent acts against anyone, nor was the president ever mentioned. I've cooperated fully with the FBI, the Secret Service, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I will continue to do so.
The aftermath of the shooting saw Hinckley in jail and Foster under siege from the press. For years afterwards, any mention of the shooting would be enough to have the actress immediately leave the interview. She confined her comments to the press conference held soon after the assassination attempt, an article entitled "Why Me?" written for Esquire magazine in 1982, and a 60 Minutes interview in 1999. Foster was also compelled to testify that she had no relationship with Hinckley at his 1982 trial. Hinckley's family hired the best defense money could buy, high-powered lawyer Vincent J. Fuller, who successfully argued that Hinckley should be found not guilty on the grounds of insanity. Instead of a life in jail, Hinckley was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for an indefinite period. There he remains, although he's since been allowed out to spend time with his family. Reagan served out his term as president and won the next election by a landslide, despite being well into his 70s. His vice president, George Bush, succeeded him. Jodie Foster went on to have an Oscar-studded career, specializing in playing victimized women who fight back against their attackers. Few criminals have captured the imagination as much as Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. The couple attracted national headlines during their crime spree throughout Depression-era Midwest America. Bonnie Parker was born in 1910 to a poor Texan family. She excelled at school and was particularly known for her creative writing. Married at 15, she separated from her unreliable husband 3 years later and was supporting herself as a waitress when she met Clyde Barrow in 1930. A year older than Bonnie, Clyde came from a poor farming family and had done time in the Texas prison system for his role in various small-time crimes. It was love at first sight for the couple, but only weeks after they met, Clyde was sent back to jail. A love-struck Bonnie smuggled him a pistol, and he escaped briefly before being recaptured. In 1932, thanks to pressure from his mother and chronic overcrowding in the prison system, Clyde was released. Before long, the petty crim and his associates moved on to bigger things, killing a man during a store robbery gone wrong, and murdering a sheriff's deputy, the first of 9 lawmen to meet their death at the hands of the Barrow Gang. Bonnie and Clyde and their gang members, including Clyde's brother Buck and sister-in-law Blanche, traveled Depression America, robbing banks, convenience stores, grocers, and gas stations. The glamorous couple became national celebrities. Their fame increased when a raid on one of their hideouts uncovered a roll of exposed film, and the photos included Bonnie posing with Clyde's beloved Browning automatic rifle, although later evidence suggested she never actually shot anyone herself. But while the public viewed Bonnie and Clyde with a romantic aura, the 13 deaths attributed to the Barrow Gang made the police less sympathetic. They had cornered Clyde several times and killed or wounded several of the gang, including Buck. But an encounter with Clyde's arsenal of stolen weapons inevitably led to police fatalities. A posse was set up to secretly hunt down Bonnie and Clyde by using gang member Henry Methuen. In return for a pardon, Methuen deliberately lost the gang, knowing that Bonnie and Clyde would go on to the rendezvous point at his parents' house in Gibbsland, Louisiana. At 9:15 a.m. on May the 23rd, 1934, when Bonnie and Clyde sped in their stolen Ford V8 along a laneway near the Methuen farm, shots rang out as the party of 6 lawmen emptied first their automatic weapons, then their shotguns, and then their pistols into the car, an estimated 50 rounds of ammunition. The couple didn't have a chance. A crowd quickly gathered, and locks of Bonnie's hair, snippets of her clothing, and fragments from the car were taken as grisly souvenirs before an angry coroner arrived at the scene and ordered it to be secured. During their escapades, Bonnie had put her writing talent to good use, penning the Ballad of Bonnie and Clyde to give her side of their story. It became apparent that the couple expected that their crime spree would end in a hail of bullets. Although Bonnie's ballad predicted that the two of them would be buried side by side after they died together, her family insisted on separate cemeteries. But thanks to several movies, books, and plays, the couple remained together forever in the public mind. Coming up, a homespun hero goes to jail. In 2005, America's favorite homemaker, Martha Stewart, launched a new daily show. The glitzy opening title showed the former model hamming it up as she recreated fashion photos taken in the 1960s. And in a cheeky nod to the court case that made Stewart notorious, there's a shot of her flanked by police officers. For while Stewart had made her name as the Queen of Chintz, thanks to her wildly popular housekeeping and designing tips, an unfortunate connection with a stockbroker resulted in her becoming a convicted felon. In 2001, Stewart was on top of the world, named the 3rd most powerful woman in America by the Ladies' Home Journal. But that same year, her world came crashing down when an investigation was launched into why she had sold $230,000 worth of stock in biopharmaceutical company Imclone, a day before it was publicly revealed that the company had failed to get regulatory approval for the drug Erbitux. Imclone executive officer Samuel Waxel and Stewart stockbroker Peter Bakanovic were also charged and later convicted. Stewart denied any wrongdoing, and her case dragged on for 2.5 years, going to trial in early 2004. She was charged with securities fraud, obstructing justice, conspiracy, and making false statements during the insider trading investigation. The judge threw out the securities fraud charge, but the jury of 8 men and 4 women found Stewart guilty of the other charges, and there was great speculation as to the sentence she'd receive.
And so far as the sentencing for Martha Stewart, she's going to get jail. There's no doubt about that. The only question is, how long? Why? The federal sentencing guidelines demand that she gets jail. The likely range is between 15 to 21 months, given the fact that she was convicted of obstruction and lying to the authorities.
Stewart was ultimately sentenced to 5 months jail, with a further 5 months to be served in home detention as part of a 2-year period of supervised release, the minimum term available, and fined $30,000. A related civil case was settled in 2005, with Stewart agreeing to a 5-year ban preventing her from serving as a director or CEO of any public company. Bukanovic received the same sentence as Stewart, while Waxel was sent to jail for more than 7 years. The case deeply divided Americans, with many of Stewart's fans remaining staunchly loyal and accusing prosecutors of engaging in a witch hunt against a high-profile, powerful woman. Every court appearance saw her surrounded by vocal fans protesting her treatment. However, prosecutors saw the publicity surrounding the trial as sending the message that no one was so rich or important that they were above the law. Stewart maintained her innocence throughout the trial and said she was deeply humiliated by the verdict.
Today is a shameful day. It's shameful for me and for my family and for my beloved company and for all of its employees and partners. What was a small personal matter became over the last 2 years an almost fatal circus event of unprecedented proportions.
But despite being forced to step down from the helm of her company, Stewart was determined not to let a criminal conviction hinder her career.
And I'll be back. I will be back. Whatever I have to do in the next few months, I hope the months go by quickly. I'm used to all kinds of hard work, as you know, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid whatsoever.
Sure enough, before long, Stewart was back in the public eye, candid and good-natured about the 5 months she'd spent in federal prison. On television in 2005, she cheerfully hiked up the hem of her trousers to show off the electronic monitoring bracelet she wore as part of the home confinement sentence. In the years since her incarceration, the public and the entertainment industry have proved to be forgiving, and she returned to daytime television with The Martha Stewart Show in 2005, which has been nominated for a number of Emmy Awards.
Writing a book called The Martha Rules, and it's a business book. My baking book, my first book in 6 years, cookbook, comes out in November, and I'm real excited about that, and many, 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 many more things. How humane are fur farms?
And the multi-talented media performer has also lent her name to an anti-fur campaign after being approached by people for the ethical treatment of animals while she was in jail.
Had an untreated eye infection.
It appears the rehabilitation of her public image is complete. The American secret bombing of Cambodia during the Vietnam War was a crime in itself, denied and covered up for years. But the destruction inadvertently triggered an even greater crime: the attempted genocide of a gentle, peace-loving people who were slaughtered in their thousands. For 4 years, the Cambodian people lived under a reign of terror, murdered by a deranged despotic leader for simply being educated, arrested and tortured by government officials on the flimsiest suspicions. Today, the bones from the country's infamous killing fields are on display at the National Museum, a reminder of Cambodia's chilling past and a warning to the future of mankind's capacity for evil. The Khmer Rouge, a group of communist extremists, seized power in 1975 after American bombings reduced the country to chaos. Leader Pol Pot renamed Cambodia Democratic Kampuchea and set about reshaping it into an agrarian utopia along the lines of Mao's China. Educated people were regarded with suspicion, and lawyers, doctors, engineers, and scientists and their families were among those massacred. It was possible to be arrested and executed simply for wearing glasses, laughing, or crying. When the regime was deposed 4 years later, 1.7 million of its citizens were dead. Bu Meng was one of 10,499 who entered the barbed wire gates of Phnom Penh's S-21 prison camp during the regime's brutal rule. He is one of only 7 who lived to tell the tale. The others were executed, often clubbed to death in the killing fields on the outskirts of the capital after months of torture to extract political confessions. I want a trial because it will help compensate for the lives of the Cambodian people who died across the country under the Pol Pot regime. The 3 years, 8 months and 20 days regime. Another reason I want a trial is because I myself have suffered a great deal. They tortured me for no reason. I'd done nothing wrong, and now I want justice to be done. I didn't know what they were accusing me of. They just came and arrested me and took me to S-21. When I got there, I found out they were accusing me of being a CIA spy. They kept on asking me questions about this while they were torturing me. I replied, I just don't know. I'm not working for the CIA. Justice has been slow for people like Bu Meng, and it's taken more than 20 years for a criminal tribunal to be set up. Meanwhile, the Cambodian people continue to rebuild their lives and work at healing the wounds left by 3 decades of conflict. Coming up, the case of the squabbling cat burglars. A year before, September 11 had focused the world's attention on Al-Qaeda. The terrorist group flexed its muscles against the sailors of the USS Cole. The US Navy guided missile destroyer was harbored in the Yemeni port of Aden on October the 12th, 2000 for a routine fuel stop. Operations were proceeding as normal. Fueling began at 10:30 a.m., an hour after the boat docked. At 11:18 a.m., a boat that appeared to be a garbage vessel came alongside the Cole, and its occupants greeted the Americans with a wave. Without warning, the boat exploded, blowing a 40-foot hole in the destroyer's side, killing the 2 suicide bombers and 17 American sailors. 39 people were injured. The bombing sent shockwaves throughout the United States.
Terrorists are determined to intimidate and prevent the United States from pursuing our worldwide national security interests, and they will continue to tenaciously look for exposed seams in our force protection armor. Their fundamental conclusion is that we must view terrorists as a relentless enemy and, quote, confront the terrorists with the same intensity and discipline that we've used in the past to defeat conventional antagonists.
An FBI investigation and 2 Pentagon reviews recommended tighter security for American forces abroad. Investigations pointed the finger squarely at the Al-Qaeda organization, a terrorist group founded by wealthy Saudi dissident Osama bin Laden that was also implicated in the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Tanzania and Kenya. The suicide bombers were identified as Ibrahim al-Thwa and Abdullah al-Misawa, both of Yemeni nationality. They used several hundred pounds of military-grade explosives to carry out their mission. Several other Yemenis, including Jamal al-Badawi, were later charged with 50 counts of terrorism offenses, including murder of U.S. nationals and murder of U.S. military personnel. 2 of the men had been captured shortly after the attacks and held on suspicion of involvement, but escaped in 2003. They were recaptured in 2004, but al-Badawi escaped again 2 years later. The attacks led to much soul-searching within the American intelligence community.
It's clear that there was a seam in our force protection armor, as I've phrased it, that there are institutional changes which have to be made and improvements which have to be made to try and prevent this from taking place in the future, once again with a caveat that as good as we get or will get in the future, that terrorists are bound to examine other ways of finding vulnerabilities.
While changes were made to the U.S.'s intelligence operations, unfortunately evidence that Al-Qaeda was intensifying its campaign against the United States was not pieced together in time to prevent the September 11 attack. that saw terrorists hijack airliners and crash them into New York's World Trade Center and the Pentagon. The USS Cole itself was saved from sinking by the dedication of its crew, who worked around the clock to keep it afloat in the aftermath of the attack. The Blue Marlin, a transport ship more used to carrying oil rigs than a destroyer, brought the 8,300-ton vessel home. Al-Badawi turned himself in to Yemeni authorities in 2007, but was pardoned by the government after pledging to renounce terrorism. However, he remains on the FBI's most wanted list, with a $5 million bounty on his head. In 2007, a U.S. federal judge ruled that the Sudanese government had contributed to the attack through its support for al-Qaeda and ordered it to pay $8 million in compensation to the families of the 17 victims. As a result of the bombing, the U.S. Navy stepped up its random anti-terrorism measures and opened a special warfare center to develop tactics, equipment, and training to combat terrorists. After 14 months of repair, the USS Cole went back into service. It is currently stationed off the coast of Lebanon. A memorial at Aden Harbor provides a constant reminder of the high price paid by 17 men and women of the USS Cole on that fateful day in the year 2000. Was Peter Scott, the notorious society cat burglar, also known as the Human Fly, acting alone when he stole Sophia Loren's jewels? Or did his colleague in crime, Ray the Cat, mastermind the heist? In 1995, Scott released his memoir, Gentleman Thief, and claimed sole credit for the robbery. This infuriated Ray Jones, who said Scott came to him for help. The heist took place in 1961, when Loren was in England filming The Millionaires with comic actor Peter Sellers. Directed by legendary British director Anthony Asquith, the romantic comedy was a huge hit and launched Sellers as a major international star. He played a diligent Indian doctor being wooed by Sophia Loren, an heiress who needs to marry to fulfill the terms of her father's will. Sellers reportedly fell deeply in love with Loren during filming, but his feelings were not reciprocated. The screen beauty insisted on wearing her own jewels on set, rather than fake baubles from the wardrobe department. This proved to be her undoing when they were stolen from her room at the Norwegian Barn Hotel in Elstree. Jones says he and Scott hired a Rolls-Royce to pose as hotel guests, but decided to break in through a side window.